A top defense official warns of China's repeated patrols near Taiwan's outlying Jinmen Islands. Anti-nuclear activists in Taiwan turn out on the anniversary of Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Taiwan, we have 20 to 40,000 of earthquake per year. That's why we should become no-nuke country.
Campervan vacations are a hot new trend in Taiwan, but are also causing problems for local officials. And some Taiwanese seek to honor Taiwan's Austronesian roots through traditional boat making and sailing.
就是你经过这样子，你身体去体验、去学习之后，你对于台湾的古代的一些历史、一些状况，没有写成文字的那个时代的状况，你会开始有一点点感觉，接近它。
Hello and welcome. This is TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Taipei is warning that China is normalizing military drills near Taiwan by holding patrols almost every week. As Rick Glut reports, the comments come as tensions remain high over a deadly incident near the outlying Jinmen Islands.
Caught on camera by a Taiwanese fisher, a Chinese fishing vessel illegally entering Taiwan's territorial waters, just 6 nautical miles off the country's main island. One of many incursions causing concern in Taiwan, as the country feels the pressure of Beijing increasingly asserting its claims of sovereignty over the island nation. Fielding questions in the country's legislature, the country's top security official said Chinese combat readiness patrols near Taiwan were part of Beijing's efforts to make its military presence near the self-ruled island the new normal.
对，我想中共对台湾的各种的军事施压的动作，它现在有个趋势，就是慢慢朝向常态化来发展。那特别刚刚委员也提到了所谓的联合战备警巡。那现在大概联合战备警巡的频次，平均大概7天到10天就会有一次的联合战备警巡。
Tensions between Taipei and Beijing have spiked in recent weeks over the death of 2 Chinese fishermen here in Jinmen, Taiwan's outlying islands just kilometers from China's coast. Their speedboat capsized as Taiwanese Coast Guard chased them out of the island's territorial waters. China and Taiwan disagree on the circumstances of the deadly incident. Beijing insists that Taiwan acted maliciously and is hiding the truth.
谈了15人就表示说，其实中方他们也不想把事情闹大，但是他们并没有放弃借这个事件做一些认知战。
Jinmen's residents are feeling the pressure. Over the weekend, what appeared to be a large cluster of Chinese fishing vessels just off the island's coast showed on marine traffic tracking websites. Taiwan's Coast Guard later said they were fishing nets and not boats, but the confusion put the area on edge.
蛮普遍的这种现象，大概推广就很多啊。我觉得现在可能是试射，现在两岸关系互动比较差然后又有那个之前所谓撞船事件，可能气氛比较敏感一点。
Beijing cut official communications with Taipei years ago, and there are no mechanisms to de-escalate maritime incidents. The danger now is that China's new normal of squeezing the island's territory will create more chances for incidents like the one in Jinmen, further destabilising this already sensitive status quo. Chris Ma and Rick Glut for TaiwanPlus.
The anniversary of Japan's Fukushima disaster has renewed concerns among anti-nuclear advocates here in Taiwan. As newly elected lawmakers take office and soon a new president, some people are concerned Taiwan's nuclear policy may take a dangerous turn. Joyce Sung reports.
Anti-nuclear protesters are here outside Taiwan's legislature demanding not to extend service of Taiwan's existing nuclear power plants. Taiwan's energy security has been a divisive topic for years, given that the country imports most of its energy. And some people see nuclear power as a lifeline, while others, like these protesters, believe that it's not worth the risk. Now, this protest has coincided with the 13th anniversary of the Fukushima nuclear disaster after an earthquake hit northeastern Japan back in 2011. And that serves as a reminder of just how horrific nuclear disasters can be. Now, back in 2011, what happened in Fukushima also helped boost anti-nuclear sentiments here in Taiwan. Now, it's expected that President-elect Lai Ching-te will continue on in the ruling party's path to decommission all of Taiwan's nuclear power plants by 2050. But protesters here are worried that with more opposition lawmakers wanting to bring nuclear power back, that path to a nuclear-free Taiwan will be blocked.
In Taiwan, we have 20 to 40,000 of earthquake per year. And also, we are very active orogeny. That's a mountain building. That means we have no place can stable with 300 to 1,000 years. That's the basic limitation for this kind of high radiated waste storage area. So we have no such kind of geology. That's why we should become no nuke country.
Anti-nuclear advocates here are worried because Taiwan is prone to earthquakes that people's safety cannot be guaranteed. They're also concerned because President-elect Lai has also hinted that he would consider keeping a reactor online for emergency use. Now, without nuclear power, Taiwan will have to rely more on fossil fuels to generate its electricity, not only drawing concerns for environmental reasons, but given increasing geopolitical tensions and a more aggressive China, that could leave Taiwan dangerously vulnerable to having its power shut off. Eason Chen and Joyce Zhen in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A group of Taiwanese lawmakers have traveled to Japan for a meeting of Asia-Pacific parliamentarians. Deputy Legislative Speaker Johnny Jiang is leading the group of 14 in the first overseas trip since Taiwan's new parliament was elected in January. They're joining the General Assembly of the Asian Pacific Parliamentarians Union in Tokyo. The meeting will focus on climate change and disaster risk reduction. The Taiwanese delegation will also meet with Japanese politicians. The Philippines will build a new port in its northern Batanes Islands with help from the U.S. The Batanes are the closest point in the Philippines to Taiwan, sitting just about 200 kilometers away from Taiwan's southernmost tip. At a Philippine Navy event, Batanes Governor Marilu Keiko confirmed that U.S. Army personnel will visit the islands in April to talk about the new facility. Keiko says the planned base aims to provide shelter for Filipino workers in Taiwan in the event of a crisis. It comes as Philippine defense officials urge the country to boost its military presence on these islands amid rising Chinese aggression in the region. For more on why the U.S. and the Philippines are expanding their presence on these islands, reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Aaron Matthew Lariosa, a security analyst currently in Chicago.
Aaron, I want to first start by asking, what is the significance of the Batanes Islands to both the Philippines and the United States?
So Batanes is the country's northernmost territory. It is located roughly between the Philippines and Taiwan, the Luzon Strait, of which is one of the few choke points in and out of the first island chain. It is extremely important for Manila to hold on to this, especially with all the tensions going on. And there's historical precedents for Manila to be worried regarding this. The first Japanese invasion troops reached the Philippines in 1941-42, first landed in Batanes to secure that as a stepping stone for further operations to the Philippines. For the United States, a lot of the same concerns reside with the Philippines, especially since the Philippines is the oldest U.S. treaty island in the region. Moreover, from an operational value, whoever controls Batanes controls the Luzon Strait in a potential Taiwan contingency that could lead to a lot of ramifications for either side who controls it.
Now, this facility is being labeled a civilian port, but it is being built in conjunction with the Philippines military and the U.S. Army. Do you see this being used for other purposes, maybe like a military purpose?
In the case of potential contingency, a conflict, a cross-strait conflicts, there are around 160 to 200,000 overseas Philippine workers in Taiwan doing various tasks, and it is imperative that Manila would get them out in terms of conflicts. Regarding potential military usages, recent drills, particularly last year's Balakatan, saw U.S. and Philippine troops send the HIMARS to the islands, conduct aerial assaults to land troops onto the islands. It has made the military operations we're seeing also unilaterally from the Philippines is mainly defensive. mainly because the significance of the islands, for example, southern operation to Taiwan by the Chinese, these islands would look pretty useful for them.
This trend of the United States and the Philippines working together to build these bases and facilities, is this a U.S.-led initiative, or is this more of a Philippine-led initiative?
So there's a lot of tangible benefits in a potential conflict if Batanes would stay free and open. First of all, I think we should recall that this trend is being led by Manila, while the United States is coming in. That is at the bequest of Manila. This is mostly, if anything, purely a Manila Philippine-led initiative, and we have to recognize the Philippines' agency in this. The United States is only coming in because of that, and Manila at the helm is deciding that yes, they are going to keep reinforcing.
That was our reporter Jaime Ocon speaking to Aaron Matthew Lariosa, a Philippine security analyst. More holidaymakers in Taiwan are opting to spend their vacations in camper vans rather than the country's increasingly expensive hotels. But the new trend is creating a few problems for local authorities. Jeremy Olivier has more.
Taiwanese vlogger Dage is a big fan of the great outdoors. His YouTube channel, Campfire, follows him around in search of new campsites to enjoy the country's natural beauty. But rather than spending the night in a tent, Dage is all about sleeping in his van, which is decked out with 2 mattresses, a kitchenette, and other creature comforts.
非常遥远，你可能要去好几天，那你可能到这边晚上需要休息，车速都可以在有充分休息，而且现在车速里面可以坐得很舒服。但是一定要记得，所有的资源都不是免费的，你在山上资源我们都好好珍惜。
It's part of a growing trend in Taiwan. Post-pandemic market forces have made the country's hotels more expensive. So now people are looking for other ways to spend their vacation. That includes overnighting in their cars near scenic areas. But the newfound love of van camping is also causing some problems for local authorities. One national park saw around 2,500 visitors in a single day at the peak of its high season. Workers were forced to chase people out of parking lots when the park closed each day. Officials say the increased presence of van campers in these areas is disruptive to local ecosystems.
他们有时候就会第一个会制造声响，不然就是会用一些灯光，其实都会干扰到他们的生态。
They also point to trash and other waste left behind by some more careless campers. One of the issues at play is that, unlike with tent camping, the country has no specific laws around camping out in cars. Some have put forward suggestions on how to get things under control.
数量上，它可以做管控，在我们园区容许的范围内，以价质量的方式，或者它就开放申请的方式，用抽签的方式都可以。但是进来之后就是遵照规范。
Seasoned van campers like Dage hope more people can take up their hobby, but say they should follow the principle of leaving no trace and make sure Taiwan's natural scenery can continue to be enjoyed by all. Howard Chang and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, why is Oscar-winning film Oppenheimer just now getting its release in Japan? Stay tuned to find out.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, be sure to check out our social media or visit us at TaiwanPlus.com.
Welcome back. This is TaiwanPlus News. Ramadan is underway in Gaza, but Israel has continued its assault on the enclave, dashing hopes for a ceasefire before the Islamic holy month began. Negotiations between Israel and Hamas on a deal to end hostilities have reached a deadlock. Israel has also announced plans to invade Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. U.S. President Joe Biden warned this would be a red line. Biden's government is building a temporary port to supply aid to people in Gaza who are now facing starvation due to Israel's continued siege of the territory. But the plan has been criticized as the U.S. remains one of Israel's strongest backers. Israel's offensive in Gaza has killed over 31,000 Palestinians since October. Foreign missions in Haiti are evacuating staff members as violence in the country intensifies. It comes after organized crime groups targeted the diplomatic area of Port-au-Prince. Haiti entered a state of emergency last week after gangs raided the country's 2 largest prisons and attacked the airport. Armed gangs control 80% of the capital. They have set fire to police stations and government buildings and are demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry. More than 15,000 people have been displaced since the state of emergency was declared. Australian grape farmers are resorting to destroying their vineyards as a wine glut affecting the country threatens crops and livelihoods. Rosie Greninger has more.
These grapes will never see the inside of a wine bottle. Australian farmers in the wine region of Griffith in the New South Wales Riverina are having to rip out rows of vines due to falling demand for wine. Running at a loss, 4th-generation wine grower James Cremesco has been forced to watch vines his grandfather planted be reduced to mulch.
Demoralising may be the right word. I really, always wanted to grow up to be a, grape farmer and really, produce good quality for the wineries. But, in today's climate, I just can't keep growing it and surviving and feeding the family.
Cremesco is now investing his time and resources into prune production. And he is not alone in making the hard choice to diversify. Millions of vines across Australia are being destroyed to rein in massive overproduction that has crushed grape prices and threatened the livelihoods of growers and makers. A global decline in wine consumption due to health concerns and competition with other alcoholic sectors hit Australia particularly hard. Demand has shrunk the fastest for cheap red wines, the country's biggest product. The market had relied on China for its growth up until 2020, when Beijing imposed strict tariffs on Australian wine in response to Canberra calling for an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID-19.
我想，澳方应该做深刻反思，他们应该首先反思有没有做到尊重中方的利益。
With that announcement, the Australian wine industry lost its biggest importer. In areas like Griffith, the price of grapes fell from an average of more than $400 per tonne in 2020 to around $200 last year. And more than 2 billion litres of wine, or 2 years' worth of supply, sits in storage on the verge of spoiling. Beijing is expected to lift those tariffs this month, but the change is not expected to mop up the glut, with China's demand for red wine falling by 50% since 2017. Still, many growers unwilling to pull up vines are losing money while hoping for the market to turn around.
But we just hope that things will improve, and we've just got to hang in there and work out how we can survive. And I feel for the growers, they're doing it very tough at the moment because they're finding it hard and the prices are not very good. But we've just got to hang in there and hopefully come out the other end.
The Australian government has forecasted another year of even lower prices and committed to supporting growers in the forms of tens of $1,000 grants. But some farmers who've been struggling for years to make ends meet feel the trade is no longer viable, leaving these unpicked grapes shrivelling on vines. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
The biopic Oppenheimer has swept this year's Academy Awards, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. The film's star, Cillian Murphy, who won Best Actor for his portrayal of atomic bomb inventor Robert Oppenheimer, dedicated his award to the world's peacemakers. Outside, pro-Palestinian protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza blocked traffic, delaying the ceremony. Several of the show's attendees wore red pins, echoing the protesters' appeal.
The Palestinian protests shut down the Oscars tonight. Humanity wins.
The movie Oppenheimer was the big winner at this year's Oscars, but 6 months after its initial release and nearly 80 years after the events it portrays, the film has yet to screen in Japan. Bryn Thomas looks at why it's only now getting its Japanese theatrical release.
Exploding 1,500 feet above the target.
On an August morning in 1945, 8-year-old Yahara Teruko saw a flash in the sky above her hometown of Hiroshima.
moment, and all of a sudden, the entire sky flashed and was illuminated in bluish white, as if the heavens had become a huge fluorescent light. I immediately fell to the ground and lost consciousness.
When she came to, the city center was leveled, and an estimated 70,000 of its residents were dead, the result of an atomic bomb attack. Tens of thousands more would die from the effects of radioactive fallout in the weeks that followed. It was the first of 2 nuclear bombings carried out by the US in its war against Imperial Japan. Nearly 80 years later, Oppenheimer, a biopic about the father of the atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer, has dominated award season and just won Best Picture at the Oscars. And yet, half a year after its release, the film still hasn't screened in Japan. On March 29th, the first and only country in history to be targeted in a nuclear attack will be the last to release Oppenheimer in theaters.
日本が最後被爆国だからっていうことなのかしら。でも被爆国でもやっぱり事実を知る。どんなに辛くても事実を知る。そして未来に生かす。これは大事だと思いますね。
Teruko wants to see Oppenheimer when it's released this month. At 86, she is one of a shrinking number of hibakusha, survivors of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and wants to keep the consequences of nuclear war in the popular consciousness.
本当に愛する者たちの未来のためにそういう良心も失ってしまうようななんてことにならないように一番元になるオッペンハイマーの映画っていうのはやはり日本でも公開して学ぶべきものがあると思うんですけど。
For Teruko, understanding and accepting the past is the best way to avoid repeating it.
だけどそれを乗り越えてね、真実を知って乗り越えて二度とその核兵器をね使わない廃絶しなきゃいけないというねところに過去の反省ねを未来に生かさなくちゃいけないなっていうふうに思います。
In the years since 1945, the number and strength of nuclear weapons has risen sharply. There are an estimated 12,000 on Earth, and the most powerful ever tested was more than 3,000 times stronger than the one that upturned Yahara Teruko's life in 1945. The movie Oppenheimer reflects the scientist's self-conflict about what he and his team have unleashed upon the world. Japan's hibakusha would remind us that this existential risk is very much still with us. Alex Chen and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
On Taiwan's east coast, a community is building their own Austronesian-style sailing boats. As Rick Loud reports, it's reviving Taiwan's seafaring traditions and reconnecting the country with the Pacific Island nations.
Local business owner Isin Chen has taken to building wooden outriggers in his spare time. He lives along Taiwan's east coast, facing the Pacific. And, inspired by the historical journeys made across this ocean, he is crafting his vessels in a traditional style. He hopes to help revive a sailing culture in danger of dying out here.
就是你经过这样子，你身体去体验、去学习之后，你对于台湾的古代的一些历史、一些状况，没有写成文字的那个时代的状况，你会开始有一点点感觉，接近它。
With no written records of how ancient Taiwanese sailed, Isin found a Polynesian boat design from Hawaii, a country 8,000 kilometers away across the Pacific, but linked to Taiwan through millennia of seafaring migration and trade. This part of the country is largely inhabited by indigenous Taiwanese, groups that have lived in harmony with the sea along this coastline for millennia. But those sailing traditions have been lost to time, as settlers from Europe, Japan and China came to Taiwan. Those settlers colonized these islands from the 1600s, oppressing and killing much of the indigenous community. They now make up just 3% of the population, and their languages and cultures are at risk of disappearing. Isin is not indigenous himself, But his project comes as communities here are increasingly reaching out to Pacific Islanders to exchange their knowledge about traditional customs, languages and culture.
那现在是人家发现到，现在其实台湾跟太平洋岛屿是相关的，甚至有人说台湾是太平洋岛屿的发源地，所以开始慢慢的去重视自己的海洋的活动，因为他们知道说，原来有一群跟我们一样的人住在很外面的岛屿。
Back in his workshop, Isin also likes to pass on to the local community what he's learned about traditional boat building and seafaring. One day, he hopes to turn this into a sailing school.
这种太平洋岛屿式的船我们台湾经常翻译为叫南岛的船，它有一种在台湾有一种特别的美感，然后有一种很特别的跟我们有一种 connection， 一种连结的感觉。
On the edge of the vast Pacific Ocean, this coastline is battered by high winds, large waves and strong currents. Many Taiwanese today consider the sea a dangerous boundary that should not be crossed. But people like Isin choose instead to harness these powerful forces of nature. For them, seafaring is a means of connection, uniting Taiwan with oceanic people thousands of nautical miles away, while anchoring it firmly in its roots. Leon Lien and Rick Lauert in Taidong County for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching this edition of TaiwanPlus News. Before we go, check out some latest highlights from the FIS Snowboard World Cup taking place in Germany and Italy. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next time.